Good morning, everyone, and welcome to today's class. So today is the second day of React, Introduction to React. Last week, we looked at some concepts, including functions, and we also went ahead to understand the structure of the code base. That is the pre-installed code base that comes with a React application. And then I also did a little bit of, spoke a little on the folder structure, that is the code base structure that I would like us to follow, which is following a modular approach to how we will develop moving forward, right? So for today, I'll just take a recap of the functions or functional components. Then we can now move on to talk about other things that we have to talk about today. Acknowledge you can hear me, someone, everyone. Yes, okay. All right. Good. So from our conversation in the last class, we created a component, a functional component called welcome card. And for that functional component, we were able to import it into our app.js and display it on the DOM, right? We were also able to create a button component and we added it to the DOM too. Right. So now let's just have a little recap. So basically, from what I've tried to make you understand, functional components are the most common, they are actually the most commonly used style in modern React, right? So they are just basic JavaScript functions, but this time they return JSX, which is like writing HTML inside JavaScript. I think we've talked about this. So this is like a simple functional component, right? What we are doing here is defining, at this level, we are defining the function, giving it a name, and we call it welcome card, right? And then we return an HTML content as JSX, where we put in an H1 tag and a P tag to represent different text. So this is our heading and this like the content, right? Then we went ahead to export this particular function as a model, and we added it to our app.js, and then we were able to have a display. Are we good so far? All right, so let's look at the same thing, but this time let's look at it from a class components point of view, right? So, well, I'm going to remove this. Okay, let's remove it and leave React. Okay, so when we talk about class components, right? There are the older ways for writing React components. So functional components are like the newer and more used method for writing components. Basically, what we do is initially, you need to understand that inside this React, remember we always import React, right? Now, React has a lot of content in it, right? Pre-built content that the class component ideally will utilize to take all sort of actions that it needs to take. So let's say we want to create a class component. We will start by saying class welcome card. Welcome card extends React dot component. So who understands this line? Just raise your hand, I'll call you, then you can unmute and we can talk. Who understands this line? This. Anybody? Nobody? Okay. All right, Josh, yeah, let's hear from you.
Okay, so I might not be very, very correct, but how I understand it is,
Josh, if you're
okay,
speaking, we can't hear you.
can you hear me? Can you hear me? Hello, can you hear me? I'm speaking now.
Can anybody hear Josh? Okay, so it's possible that the issue is from me. Okay, hold on,
Can you hear me
guys.
now?
So, Udo, can you speak, please? Unmute yourself and speak.
Hello, sir. Can you hear me, sir? Hello, please. Can anyone hear me?
Okay, I
Yeah,
guess I'm
yeah, yeah.
having some issues with my sound.
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, hold on. This is what you do. Just text it, please, because to handle this, I might need to leave the call, and I don't want to do that. Yeah, so give me a minute, guys. Let me change my setup, okay? Josh, can you try speaking again?
Can you hear me now? Hello, sir, can you hear me now?
Okay, that's fine. We'll use the text box, please, for this class. I'll rectify this after the class. Okay. Yeah, you can put your hand down. Yeah, I've seen your comment. So just says might not be very correct, but making use of the welcome component and still adding new values or functionalities to it. Well, relatively, you are on track, right? So what happens here is React has pre-built features like components. So this component now is what we want to extend when using this welcome card, right? So in essence, what we're saying is for this welcome card, we want to take out the features that are inside React component and add it to welcome card, thereby turning this welcome card to like extended version of a React component. Does that make sense? Are we together? Okay, so for the benefit of Ade, who said we should take it again. So what happens here is we've defined a class, right? And for that class, the component name will be welcome card. Now I want to say for this component, we want to utilize the features that are embedded inside React components, right? So for us to use the features that are inside React component, we want to extend this welcome card to have all the features that are inside React.component. So now this welcome card will be an extensive component that contains everything inside React.component. Do you follow? All right. So now what we'll do next, we can just render, right? We can render our JSX just after this. And return. So let's use the same text. Welcome to my first React app, and this is that, right? So we still need to export this function, right? So now that we've done this, if we check our UI, since we've already imported this particular welcome card, okay, so the name is different. So welcome card. Yeah. So we should have this same content, correct? In our welcome card. Let's be sure that we have the most recent content presented here. Good. Okay, so are we clear? Are we clear with this? Can we move on? All right. Good. So with this now, you understand what the class is, right? And then you understand what it means to extend the class components, right? And then we will look at constructors, then super, then this. I believe I explained. Yeah. So we'll get there. Don't just relax, okay? Yes, this is another way of writing your component. This is when you're using the class method to write your component. Now, like I said, this primitive, this is like old method. But it's important that you understand this too, so that if you find yourself in scenarios or where this is the pattern of writing components, it won't be strange to you. So now let's go ahead and we'll come back to talk about constructors and super and this while we talk about props, okay? So now let's go back to our initial component structure. Or what we'll do is, yeah. What we'll do is take this on. Hold on, guys. All right. So I don't want us writing code and wasting too much time. So I'll just paste it here. Okay. So let's go ahead and look at props, right? And I think some people have submitted their tags where the request was for you guys to use props to pass content into your buttons and your bio card. So who can tell us a little bit about props? Please feel free to use the text box. Thank you. So I'll be waiting. Yeah, Emmanuel, you can go ahead. Just use the text box, please. All right, so it helps to make content. It helps to make, okay, it helps to make components reusable. All right, and then just says passing values from parents to children. Okay, any other person pass specific data from a parent component to the children. Yes, okay. Prop is essentially how we pass data between components, particularly from parent to child. All right, okay. Yeah, I think that's a lot already. Let's pick up from there, right? So you all are correct with your definitions, right? So prop is like a short form for properties. So they are how we send data into components. So yes, definitely based off sending data, it is definitely going to be based on hierarchy. So you'll be passing content from a parent component to a child component ideally. Okay, so let's say we want to pass props we want this component now to receive props, right? So what I would do now is add props here. So in essence now, this is like giving this component, the component is going to accept a value, right? It can be just a string, depending on what you're writing. Assuming we're writing TypeScript, maybe we'll need to define the kind of data types and what these props should expect, right? But in this case now, we're just going to call it props and it will be able to accept whatever we want it to accept, right? Okay, so let's say for props now, we want to have, instead of having the full text of welcome to my first application, we want to say header. We want to call it heading. All right. And then we say props dot heading. Okay, so now what happens here is that if we want to pass this heading here, for this component to display heading, right now this component is not going to display any heading. It will come here because we have not added any heading to it, right? So if we come to app.js and we say heading, and then we pass content to heading, like say string content to heading, right? And we save, we can now see heading displayed here. Now what happens is this component has become a reusable component now. So I can use this component in different places to greet as many people as I want to greet. So let's assume I want to say, welcome David. Welcome David to my first React app, right? I should be able to call the same component again and say, welcome John. I can call it again and say, welcome Udo. Okay. So what happens now is we're going to have 3 different lines of code with the same component, but for the 3 of them, they will have different content. They are all greeting different people. Do you understand? Are we following? Is anyone confused?
Yeah, we are following, sir.
All right. So now that we now know how to utilize props, right? In this is a functional component, right? So we have successfully added um, the header prop. So we can go ahead and add details or bio or whatever I want to call it. So let's just say bio. And we say props.bio. Right, and if we go back, we should now be able to add value as a props here and have it display in our code. Okay. So props.bio now displays. So let's see when it's not there. Let's see what happens when it's not displayed. Okay. But once we add that prop, which it works, it displays. Are we good? Are we together? Now we can go ahead and do the same with our button component, right? So we maybe want to give this button, utilize this button in different places and call it and give it different titles, right? So we can say props dot title. All right, and then we bring props here. Okay, so we go back to button now, we can say title equals to make me. We can also say we can duplicate this button and say submit. So Udo, I can see your hand. Go ahead and ask your question in the chat box. Hello, Udo. So you can ask your question in the chat box. All right, while we wait for Udo's question, we can go ahead and test out our application. So you can see it's the same button, but you can see that it shows click me and this one shows submit, right? So you can modify this button to do a lot of things, basically. You can add an on-click event, you can add a submit rule, whatever you want to add to it. So that you can utilize it in different places, right? Why is the props not in curly braces? Here. Is it here? How to do? Yeah, it doesn't need to be in curly braces. Okay, so maybe you are specifying that what you are trying to pass is an object, or you are trying to destructure it. Are we together? Can we move on? Right. So yeah, so we can do the same for a class component, right? So let's remove this and work with a class component. So for this class component, in order to utilize props, we are going to use the this keyword, right? So we can say this dot props. So we're working with heading and bio. Heading and bio. So I believe I spoke about the this keyword in, I think, last week's class. So I hope it's not strange. I hope that this keyword is not strange. Okay, good. So we are assessing the instance, the present instance of these props. So we are now picking these props from the present object that has been created by the class function, right? And that is where we are binding, we are getting our header prop from. Okay. So don't be confused with that. All right, let's go on. Let me just explain this. So this keyword refers to the current instance of the class, right? So we are saying the current instance of this class, we want to access the props of the current instance of this class, which is the particular content that has been passed to that particular instance that we've created. So if we have two different situations now, say we have this component being used again somewhere else, right? Note that each of them will be a different instance of the particular class. So let's say John, right? So if we save this and we go to our, so you can see that we still have our welcome John to my first react, welcome David to my first react, because for each of them, there are different instances of this particular class component. So we are assessing the particular instance, the particular content of that instance. That is why we can access them separately using the this keyword. Okay. Are we good? Yeah, so why I'm taking out pain to explain this is because at the end of the day, if you understand all these core things, it's easy to manipulate your code however you want it to be, right? Especially when we start doing dynamic components and reusability, right? All right. Then I'm seeing yes, sir, from iPhone. I've said this before. I don't know who iPhone is. Please do well to rename yourself so that I can tell. Okay. Is that clear? Yes, so of course, if you want your buttons to have different colors, you still do the same. You still have to, you still pass it as a prop. Because now you are not talking about, let's say you want to use a different, you want to use a custom you want to use a custom class, right? For your components. Okay. So this now becomes this can be used as a prop. You can use this as a prop, right? So let's say custom button. And that's prop. Right? So what I can do with this now is inside my code, that is where I am using, is that a welcome card? Okay, that's the button, right? Yeah, so where I am using a button, if I pass custom button and give it my styling, right? Any style I'm giving this custom button here will be accessed there as a class style. I don't know if you understand what I'm saying. Do you understand? Okay, so first thing first, inside your class, right? Remember that inside your class, your class name is expecting different class names, right, as strings, right? For us to pass prop now into the class name as a string, we now utilize the template literal, right? And then we use this to reference this particular class name. So this is now a class name. It's a props, but it's a class name. So any style I'm passing to this custom button here is considered as a class name being passed to this class name, which should affect the style of this button. So let us go in. This is not part of this class, but for the benefit of those who don't understand, I think we have like 4 people, 3 people. Okay. So let's say we now, from here, we have custom button, right? And we want to say, for custom button, we want to say color. All right, and then pick this color. So for the purpose of this class, I'm going to style this color inside our app.css. When we get to styling, we'll organize ourselves and talk more about styling, okay? Yeah, so which color is this? This is blue. Okay. So now it's just color, background color, color, background color. Okay. So if we come back here, so this will become, okay, so if we come back here and we save this, we should have our styling on that button. Please, this should not confuse you. Are you still confused? Yeah, thank you, Adenia. Are you still confused with this styling I just did? Okay. I think I've heard from Udo. Excel. Is Excel still on the call? Are you clear? Okay, I just have to move on then. So basically what happens now is if I come to this component now, this is the same component, the same button, right? But if I say color 2, right, that means I'm giving it a different class name, and I come to my CSS and give it different styling. I say color 2. So maybe I can give it blue. Background color can be like tinted a little. Okay, and then can also. All right, so if we save this now and check out our code, you see that we are using the same components, but you can see that they have different styles because I am passing the style as prop from here. So this is now the class name. Like you would have like inside here, this class name, right? This is now the new class name. So in my app.jsx, where I'm utilizing the custom button styling, this serves as my class name now for this component, because any style I give to this custom, any style I give to this custom button is going to affect the button, the instance of this button, right, of this component. So anywhere I style this custom button, it can be gotten from these props and utilized to give this button any kind of style that I want it to have, thereby making it reusable. So now I can come here and I have used this particular button in two different places, and I have passed different styling to them. So it's the same button, but they look different now because they are utilizing different styling, just the same way they have different text content, which is being also passed down as a prop. Are we together? I think we have taken too much time on props. Please clarify that we're good. Okay, Excel, you get it now. Okay, all right. Okay, so let's go ahead. All right. So let's talk about state management, right? Or let's talk about states first. So what do you understand by the states of? Hello, everyone. So what do you understand by states in React? Okay, the present condition of something. Okay. Yes, any other one? Okay. So someone says state controls what you want to see on your screen. Okay, how your component reacts and or behaves. Okay. I want to hear from the person. Who was that iPhone person, please? What's your name, please? Yeah. I need to know that person. Is the person still on the call? Okay. Kaki said they are objects that store dynamic data. All right. Okay. Your responses all make sense. So let's go ahead and see what we can do. So I'm sure we've heard about maybe you guys have heard about, sorry, I am Obina. Okay, Obina. All right, please go ahead and change the display name. I want you to respond more in the class, and I don't want to call you iPhone again. Thank you. All right. So I believe some of you have heard about hooks, React hooks, right? But for today's class, we are not really going to be talking so much about React hooks, but understand that React hooks are like pre-built, pre-installed functions that React provides that can help us manage the life cycle of our applications, right? So I'm sure you understand what it means, what we mean when we say life cycle. So basically for life cycle, we're talking about when an application mounts, when it updates, when it unmounts or gets destroyed, right? Or gets removed from the DOM. That's the life cycle. So it's basically saying you want to control what should happen when your application has its first display, or when your application is updating content, or when your application or when that particular view is getting out of sight. So yeah, we are getting a new view, right? Or you're trying to have new changes on the DOM. So that's like basically what we mean by life cycle. So these hooks have already been designed and pre-installed in React, right? So you don't necessarily have to create them. But when we talk about hooks later, we'll also look at custom hooks. So custom hooks are hooks that we would have to create based on what we want to use the hook to, the actions we require those hooks to perform and the use case involved, right? So when we get to that point, we'll see how we can create custom hooks and also utilize them. But for today, we're just going to look at useState. useState is also a React hook, but which is used for controlling the state of an application, right? So this is how we define. Hold on, let's walk inside our welcome card. This will have to change. Okay. So let's walk within our welcome card, right? So for us to utilize useState, we will need to import useState from React, right? We'll have to import useState from React. So now we have imported useState. So let's look at the contents of useState, right? So here, count, all right? Count represents the current state value, right? So this one is like, it represents the present state value. Now, based off this particular state function that we've created, the current value is 0, right? Now, if we console log this count, if we console log count, right, we should see okay, so we can see here that our initial value is 0, right? If we change this value to 10, our initial value would be 10. Someone is drawing on my screen, please. iPhone again. Please, let's stop that. We can actually pass a string to this and say John, and the initial state will be John. Okay, whatever we pass here can show as the initial state over here. Now let's go ahead and talk about set count, right? So now for set count is the function. It's a function that React has provided for us to utilize in updating the initial state of our value, right? So you want to update the count by using this set count to now set a new value to this state. So if the initial value is 0, after we utilize set count, we should have a different value in count, even if this value here is still 0. So let's see that in action, right? So let's utilize this button component. And then let's add an click. Yeah. Oh, now click. Okay, so all right. Excuse me. Okay, so we have click me. So let's update. Right. Okay, so we have our button with update. Hold on, guys. Yeah, custom button is not defined. Okay, so the issue we had was that we had not imported custom button, right? Now we have imported it, it should display. Okay, so we have our update button right here. So let's clean up this code a little. I think it's too clustered. So let's have just we can give our button a color to make it look a little good. I want to say count. All right. So good. So what we have here, we have our welcome David to my first application. This is a simple card component. Then we want to do a little bit of incrementing activities on this particular count, right? So we have 0. And what we are doing here, we've defined an on-click event that should add 1 value each time we click on this button. It should add 1. It should add 1 to the initial value of count, right? So if we come here and we click on update, we see that the present value now updates and becomes 1 because we've added 1 to it, right? If we click again, it updates again to 2. And as you can see from here, where we consoled our count value, you see that the count value is changing from 0, 1, 2. But if you come here, you notice that the initial value still remains the same, right? So what we have done is we are now manipulating this count using the set count function here to set a new value of count based on this arithmetic equation that we've added here, right? So for every time this on click is triggered, this set count would have 1 extra value added to it, the count value. So that's why we're having these new figures come up every time we update, right? Now we can say update plus, and then we can still pick this button and say update minus. Right? So let's say updates minus. So essentially what's going to happen now is that at the point where we click on update minus, it will be subtracting 1 from the initial count, right? And then we can add, we can subtract. Are we following? Yeah, so I have just Bolu Tife following. I need everybody to be with me. Are we all following? Okay. Mohammed. All right. Yes, yeah. Okay. Okay. All right, let's carry on. So now we've basically done state management with regards to the count effect that we wanted to implement here, correct? So let's go ahead and do the same thing with our, we'll do the same thing with our class components. All right. So when we come down to our class components, first thing we want to do is utilize our constructor. Okay. So yeah, so first thing we want to do is utilize add our constructor, right? I believe we already spoke about this last week. So nothing strange here, correct? We spoke on this extensively last week. Can we move on? Response, please. Can we move on? Okay, all right. So yes, okay, excellent. Okay, so what happens next now? What happens next now is, now that we've constructed our props, that is the object, and then for the state, we have our initial state, right? So for class components, remember class components, we cannot utilize hooks within class components, right? So hooks only work within functional components. So for lifecycle manipulation within class components, we'll discuss that when we are discussing lifecycle generally, okay? Basically, for this scenario, we have an initial instance of count 0, right? So for us to manipulate this count now, we will have to pass a function of set state to this instance. So we are going to say this dot set state count this dot state dot count. So remember, we have count, right? Count is the actual state that we want to manipulate, right? But for this count, we are now saying we want this count to be the present instance of this object, the state of that present instance of this object, and then we want to access the count in it, then add 1 to that very initial value. We want to do the same and subtract 1 from the initial value, and then we want to as well access this particular instance and then utilize the set state function to set the new state. Okay, now at the point of an on-click event, right? So when this on-click event is triggered, this action should take place. Now we still have our props working here because we've still passed in our props value, we passed in our update minus, and we're also passing in our color variants, right? So for us to see the initials from the initial state to an updated state, we are assessing it via this, right? Via the present instance. So we are checking the present instance, the state of the present instance, and then we are checking the count value in that state. Are we together? Now, if we save this, okay, if we save this and come here, it should give us the same result, right? So let's refresh this. So we have count of 0. If I click on the top, it should increment. It should increment as many times as I want it to. And if I click on the bottom, it should subtract. Okay? Are we good? Is anybody confused? Anybody lost? So that we can quickly track back and move forward. Okay. So there are other ways of managing states, right? There's use context, which is also a provision given by React, right? So for useState is more of a component-based approach or method for managing states, where we have use context. Use context is more of a global scope method for handling states, right? So when we talk about global and component-based, it's just simple. So component-based is like your personal notebook, right? So it's for only you. So you're like the component, and you're the only one who has access to your notebook, right? While the use context is like a classroom, a blackboard, or let's say a whiteboard in a classroom, right? So that whiteboard is accessible not just by only you, but by everybody in the class. So use context is a way of managing your state at the central place where all the components within your application can access that very state value, while use state is just for your component. So the only way another component will access this count, right, is if you pass this count as a prop. Okay. Now, one thing you need to always remember is you cannot modify. Yeah, exactly. So you cannot modify a prop, right? But you can modify your state. You can modify the state, but you cannot modify your props. So use component. I did not talk about use component. I say use context. Use context. Context. Emmanuel, are you with me? Emmanuel, can you acknowledge, please, so that I can move? Oh, that's fine. It's okay. So you want me to take that again? Okay. So I said there are other methods of managing states in your application. So useState is basically function-based, right? So for use states like this, you cannot access these states globally in your application. Then I talked about the global scope and component scope, right? So global scope is like having a blackboard where everybody can see what's on the blackboard, while the component scope is like your own personal notebook where only you can have access to. So use context is a global scoped method for handling state, right? So when you handle state in using use context, your application generally, all the components in your application can access the state. Like you can access the state that you've declared inside a use context across your whole application. But when you use useState is inside the component. So the only way you can access useState inside that component is if you pass it as a prop to the next component. Are we following? Emmanuel, are you clear now? All right, Emmanuel, I want to hear from you. Are you clear? Example. Okay, so we have an example of useState already here. So I don't know what you mean by example. We will handle use context in when we get deeper into things. We are still handling like basics. We'll get to use context. So if that's what you're asking, just you have to be patient, okay? Take things step by step. All right. Yeah. Okay, so let's look at event handling. So basically, I think we've kind of covered event handling when we utilized the on-click event here, right? So event handling is there to help you handle user actions easily, right? So let's assume that for this component, hold on, and I'll have to comment this out again. So let's assume that for this component, all right, we want to add for this on-click event, let's just have a new button. Let's have a new button that says click me. Okay. So for this button, we want to have a handle click function. All right. Now let's define this handle click function. So if we come up here, I can say const handle click arrow function. And then I want to pass an alert that says button clicked. Okay. So with this, if I save this, we all understand what an arrow function is. So all I'm trying to do here is for when this on click is triggered, it should handle this function. It should call this function. And once it calls this function, I want to see an alert saying that the button was clicked, right? So if I save this and I come here, I need to refresh this. Okay. So if I click on click me, it gives the alert that says button clicked. Are we following? Are we together? All right, good. So this is a typical example of an event listener, okay? And also this generally, this is an example of event handling. This is also an example of event handling, and this too is also an example of event handling. So as far as you are trying to check a particular event, whether it's a click, it's a scroll, before taking a particular action, right? So you want to check first if somebody clicked. Then if the person clicked, you want this handle click function to work, right? Likewise, this, you want to check first. So this set count is not going to set any count until there is a click on this button. There are countless events handling, right? There are form submission, there's a lot. So what you guys would do for me is to go ahead and check event handlers, right? So study them for your own self-aggrandizement. Right, just check for as many event handlers as possible. Get to know them, get to know when they are used, right? Okay, so yeah, so there's a question. With the current version of React, is it advisable just to stick to function component? So my response will just be simple. What people use presently is functional components, right? So it's simpler to write, it's faster in development, right? They have better, well, if you are very good at using the life cycle for class, you can still achieve the same efficiency. But for using hooks are a lot faster and more efficient, right? And efficient when handling your side effects. So people generally use function components. But why we go ahead to teach class component is because you might be fortunate to be in an environment, to find yourself in an environment where they have legacy code. Legacy code is old code. So you might find yourself in an environment where the pattern of coding or what their legacy code base was designed with is a class method. So if that particular environment does not require you to remodel or refactor that code base to a component-based code base, you would have to work with what they have, right? So in those kind of scenarios, it is just ideal that you understand how class components work, and you should be able to adapt. So that is why we take the time to teach class components. Does that answer your question? So, and then, yes, and then for your personal development, if you have side projects you want to do and you feel like you want to experience class components, you want to use them exclusively, of course you can. It's still a way of getting your hands dirty, right? Like I always say, for you to get better, you need to practice, you need to do. It's in doing that makes you better, right? Yeah, so practice makes perfect. Yeah, thank you. Can go on now, Bolu. Are you good? All right. Yeah, you're welcome. Okay. So let's go ahead. Let's go ahead and let's look at conditional rendering, okay? Quickly. I think this will be the last thing we'll take before we call it a day. All right. So what do we understand by conditional rendering? Anybody? Anybody? Conditional rendering, please. Can anybody explain to us what that is? Bello. Give it a try. Just write it in the text box. Is Bello with us? Okay. Okay, so Bolu says showing or hiding parts of a user interface based on certain conditions. All right. If a component meets some conditions, it should be rendered. If not, it shouldn't. It should not. Okay. I think when a certain condition is met, okay. Conditionally displaying data, given that some conditions are met. Okay. So yeah, the responses are actually very, very encouraging. It means that people have done your personal research before our class, making things very easy for us. Conditional rendering is more or less like a true or false statement, and based on this, an action is taking place. Okay, that's from Emmanuel. Okay, so yeah, okay, let's see what Bello has to say. It means give a statement a condition, like using logical statement, optional chain, if statement. Okay, okay. All right, so let's go ahead and see what that looks like. So let's assume that, so I believe that we are done with this. I'm going to be taking this out. Okay. Okay, so let me just take it out. Let's just work with it. So we have our props, right? And then we want to say, so I'm going to take this out. Yes. Okay. Okay, so we have our greetings, and then we want to say if. So let's use an if block to handle this. So let's say if loading, we want to return loading, right? Then we'll say else, we want to return we want to return okay. We want to come here where we are using our, that's welcome card, correct? Okay. Where we have our welcome card, so we are not using all this anymore. So I want to say loading. Let's call it is loading. I want to save this true. False. Okay, so if we save this and we come to card components, let's rename this to is loading. Okay, so basically we save this, right? All right. So if you see what I've done here is I've simulated a loading feature. So let's assume that we have let's assume that this is the same, this is also a button, right? So this is just to explain something. We'll make it a little bit simpler when with the next example I will give, right? So let's say we have this component and we want a situation where if this loading is true, we want to display loading, the loading text like this, or the button with the loading text like this. And then if this loading is false, we want to present a sign-in button. Now, what happened here is I simulated a truthy loading state, right? So since it is true, we are going to see that it shows loading here. So if I change this to false and save, it should show sign in. Do we understand? Are we following? All right, so we can actually simplify this further and just do something like this. So instead of having all these if statements, right? We can have our code back, okay? All right, so we can have our code back and then I'll still add our loading states again. Then let's leave it at true. So now if we come here and we want to do the same thing, so we want to utilize that prop. This is loading prop now in our button component here, right? Right, for this text. So in essence, what we'll do now is for title, we can say, instead of this, we say backticks, right? And then we want to have props. Props dot is loading. So we want to check, we're saying if this props dot is loading is truthy, it should display loading. But if it is not truthy, it should display updates. Okay, so it should display update plus 1, right? Is anybody confused? Are we all together? Am I alone in the class? Okay. All right. So what this is going to do now is so since is loading is truthy, this update button should show so let's see it's truthy. Yeah. So it's truthy. Let me just show this first. And update. Shouldn't be update first. No. Yeah, I see your comments. Hold on. Okay, I see. So doesn't okay. Okay. I should display actually. So hold on, guys. Let me see what is going on. Okay, so this is what we are going to do, okay? So the issue we are having is with the fact that the state of is loading is not persistent. So let's do is loading and set loading, and then let's call it so. So let's give it is loading us. The initial value should be true, okay? So let's go ahead and test this out now. And then let's see what happens if I move this. Okay. So let's change this to false. Okay, so we are having some difficulty. Okay, yes, exactly. So I'm passing is loading to the route component, correct? So ideally this should happen inside. This should happen inside welcome. My bad. Yeah, so this is where it should happen. So in case, what we'll be doing is to pass is loading directly without props. Yes. So when we pass is loading directly without props, inside components, we should be able to now display is loading here. Okay. Okay, so no need to implement is loading inside here, so it's okay here. All right, so ideally what happens now is false, so it's supposed to show updates, right? So once this is converted to true, okay, it should show loading. Yeah, so we got it working. All right. Mohammed, thank you for that very, very quick observation. All right, let's go on. I think that's basically what we have to cover today. So do we understand the concept of conditional rendering? using both the long form, that is using the if statement, and also using the short form. Are we good? All right, okay, all right. So let's look at when to use functional components and when to use class components. And this is not like it's not compulsory. It's not like we're saying you must use this for those kind of scenarios. So let's say you are building a new app, like a modern React component. I will encourage you to use the functional components, right? Okay, so I'm using useState because it will persist more. Yeah, do you understand? It will just be a little bit more persistent. We are now having like a state instance. So that way we can easily just update that state over here. You get Excel, do you understand? Hello, Excel, do you understand? We can actually just say const is loading and give it false. This will still give us the result that we want, right? So if we save now, since it is false, it should display update loss. If we change this to true, it should also give us loading. So well, you can actually, I don't know why you will want to use class functions in some parts of your projects, and then use functional components in some parts. You are writing a project, you want some level of uniformity and readability, right? You want somebody to come on your project and easily understand what's happening. So if I come on your project and I'm seeing functional components and then I get used to it, and the next thing I'm seeing class component and I'm like, why is this developer confused? You should pick a side, right? If you want to go old school, go old school. You want to uh, write your code with functional components, write your code with functional components. Do you understand? As you can see, this particular project I just wrote now, I have done functional component and class component inside, and it did not give me any issue. So you can actually write the both of them in one, even inside one file, and not have any issue as far as they serve the purpose that they want to serve. But when you start looking into scalability and code base maintainability, it's important that you focus more on consistency. So you're not looking at how do you make sure that people understand your code better than once they look at it. They don't need you to literally walk them through your whole code base. They can just come on your code base, understand your your folder structure, find whatever they want to find very easily, get into the code, understand what's happening there, and then they go through your whole code base and they are seeing that you have like consistent pattern of writing your code, you have consistency. It's very important, right? Yeah, unlike when they come into your code base and your folder structure is just scattered. So before they can find one component or more, they've checked everywhere. They don't sweat, you know? Same thing with your component. They're already trying to get used to how you've written your functional component and probably they're already enjoying it. And then they go to your next component and they are seeing class components and they're like, oh, wow, okay. Yeah, well, that's why it's old school anyways. According to you, it seems to give headache. But you understand what how to write a class component. This is like about the same thing. It's just that they have like just different methods, right? But they are doing the same, they are practically doing the same thing. Okay, so you can use functional components to when you want to use hooks, right? Like use state, use effect, and use ref, use memo. There are a lot of hooks that you can use. So if you want to use React hooks, then functional components are advisable, is what you use. So then you want to have a simpler, more readable code, right? You use functional components. Then you don't need lifecycle methods like components did mount, components will mount, components will update, right? Components will unmount. All those lifecycle methods are not necessary in functional component. You can use effects to do all the work that you would want to divide into like 4 different lifecycle methods in a class component, right? Now, for class component, you're maintaining other legacy code, like I said earlier. So if you find yourself in an environment where maybe they have old code base, legacy code base that was probably built on or built using class components, then you just have to adapt to what they have, right? Exactly. And then you need to understand React's old lifecycle methods. So you can also utilize class components to understand the old lifecycle methods. And yeah, when we talk about lifecycle methods later, you see the importance of understanding both class components and functional components. Because when you understand the different life cycles inside the class component, you will appreciate use effects more, right? Because now it will be easy for you to understand the capacity or the kind of things you can use effect to do. Okay, are we together? Okay, all right. Any other person? Any other question? Okay, so everybody is good. So I believe we can do better now with our attacks that dropped day before yesterday. Yes, okay, all right. Thank you everyone for joining us today. And today, this will be the end of our class for today. Have a nice day ahead, and I look forward to seeing you in the next class. Thank you.